This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and fashion. I'm Nick Manz. On today's program, it's a design special. We talk sofas and hear from designers including Cecilie Manz and Archibong. All that coming up on Monocle on Design. Hello and welcome to Monocle on Design. I'm Nick Manz and I'm joined in the studio by...
Grace Charlton.
I just figured we'd do something different. Have you introduced yourself, Grace Charlton? But we're here to preview the November issue, which is a design special, both heavily involved in pulling this together. But to kick off proceedings, maybe we should hear from our boss, Andrew Tuck, Monocle's editor-in-chief, who recorded this lovely column musing on the importance of the sofa.
It was 18 years ago that we went to the B&B Italia store on the Brompton Road in Knightsbridge and bought a sofa, a Harry. We had it covered in a dark grey fabric to contend with the paw prints of our then hound, Bruno the Weimaraner. Somehow, come delivery day, the team actually managed to manoeuvre Harry up the stairs, like some reluctant-to-be-budged drunk, and deposited him in the first floor sitting room. To be clear, he's actually rather svelte, and his legs can be unscrewed. It's just our London Mews home is a bit dinky. Harry is the guest who stayed. As I write this from the comfort of an armchair, he's stretched out in front of me, not a care in the world. Unsurprisingly, over that 18-year arc, he's needed a bit of work to maintain his looks. Cushions had to be restuffed when his sinewy body gave way to the upholstery equivalent of middle-aged spread. And the covers have been replaced twice. The most recent makeover saw Harry get a new light grey Kvadrat suit. Our November issue is a design special with a 16-page expo about, well, sofas. Being editor-in-chief of Monocle, you get to come up with some ideas for all of the editors, who rightfully ignore most of these in favour of their own genius plans. But in my colleague Nick Manz, I have a sparring partner who is always up for a challenge and sometimes seems happy to make some of my dafter ideas work. Ages ago, I suggested that we do a feature on architects and designers and their sofas of choice. Well, he's delivered with aplomb. We see a suited and shoeless Daniel Liebeskind perched on the vast sculptural stretch of his La Maquette sofa, designed by Pierre Paulin and produced by Louis Vuitton. Piles of reading matter awaiting his attention are on the complimentary coffee table. Then there are the designers Fien Muller and Hannes van Severen on their pillow sofa by BD Barcelona, and chilling on the cushions between them is their adorable dog. Or how about Grant Wilkinson and Teresa Riviera with their Pioneer sofa by SCP, who we see with their 4-year-old child all squeezed together in a moment of familial intimacy. Beds are more likely to be the stages for life's biggest events, from births to deaths, and hopefully lots of mattress spring challenging nocturnal activity. But sofas are where life just happens. Sofas are where we snuggle, have TV dinners, where newspapers are read, sneaky Saturday afternoon naps taken. Sofas are where we entertain neighbours and parents, or use as a sort of domestic holding pen for outsiders. Sofas are where first kisses happen, where children bounce, where news is broken. Sofas embrace you at the end of a crap day. Sofas are for sharing and for solitude too. That's pretty remarkable for a single piece of furniture. It's why our sofa will be sticking around for some time. On its cushions and resting on its steady arms, my household's lives also continue to unfurl. 2 men and a dog. Oh, and Harry, of course.
My thanks to Andrew Tuck for that lovely column.
What an icon.
Truly an icon, but and with an iconic sofa. And we're going to dive into the expo in a moment. But Andrew there was talking about, 18 years with this significant sofa, his good friend Harry. You're about to launch into a journey with, hopefully of a similar length of time with your own sofa. You've just purchased one. Tell us a little bit about this emotional roller coaster that is bringing a sofa into your world.
So it took about 3 months to settle on a sofa. My partner and I have been together for coming up to 9 years. I thought we'd exhausted all topics of conversation. It turns out choosing a sofa kept us talking for many, many hours over dinner. And we settled on the Soriana sofa by Casina.
I mean, that's huge. And also great, I think, relationship advice. If things are kind of getting stale, people sometimes throw kids or pets into the mix.
It's bigger than marriage, honestly.
Buy a sofa. So tell us about the conversations that go around this. You're talking about, obviously, the scale and how it's going to fit in the room, but also mood. Like, what do you unpacking?
So, unsurprisingly, I'm a little bit more on the aesthetics over comfort side of things. My partner wanted to sit in everything first, which was really annoying because I was ready to just buy online and see how we could squeeze it in. But he insisted that we went to the showrooms and had a look and touched the fabrics in person, and I'm glad he did that because I think hopefully we've got a good one and we can keep it for as long as Andrew Tuck is keeping his Harry. Also, potentially there's excitement to come further down the line when you maybe bring an armchair into the fold. It sits alongside the sofa, build a little bit of a lounge room family. But I digress. But what is funny there is that you've mentioned the fact that you were talking about your concern was aesthetics, his concern was comfort, and both obviously in equal measure. But within this expo where we spoke to 12 designers who I guess are in the world of making and shaping sofas, our living rooms, so many of them talked about the fact that the sofa doesn't just need to be comfortable. One of the most important things, a thread that kept coming out, was just how critical it was that these sofas looked good. They're a sculptural piece. Daniel Libeskind, he's sitting on this amazing Le Maquette sofa, produced as a one-off by Louis Vuitton. It's phenomenal, but it's a sculptural work. It's not just about the comfort. So I think you are onto something. Yeah, there. I feel like sofas can be sort of unsexy compared to an armchair. It's easy to look at an armchair and be taken by it. But a sofa, when you sift through the masses of sofas that exist out there, is just really drab.
Because I think
all of these were amazing. My favourite sofa in that expo was Joris Poggioli's sort of black leather 80s one. I thought it looked really good.
But doesn't that and I think that also captures the essence of him as a designer. And I think that's also part of this. This is the most significant piece of furniture that I guess we'll have in our homes, that we'll have in our living room. So it does become the defining thing. The other curious thing I found was, I guess, a lot of people talking about the fact that they had a moment where it was like, this is mine, this is what I need. Daniel Libeskind, again, he saw this sofa at a Louis Vuitton exhibition and he literally said it was an impulse buy. Like, this was just something that he had to have. Another architect, Wael El Awar from Dubai, he said he didn't even know the name of it. It was in terrible condition, but he knew it was his. It had to be his. He saw it at a flea market in Beirut and brought it back to Dubai with him and made it his own. I think that's it. A good sofa has the power to, I guess, shape a room, and hopefully that room is a marker of our identity as people. Like, that's why we get so attached to furniture. That's why your partner was so concerned with having something comfortable, because he's going to spend, I imagine, a lot of time watching Western movies on it.
Yeah. And Brentford matches.
And you're going to be probably just, I imagine, walking past, admiring it, and then moving on.
No, I'll be reading a magazine or something. Something analog. But how about for you, reporting this and commissioning and editing? Were there any surprises, any favourite sofas? What do you have your eye on? Also, what's your dream sofa if money were not an issue? What would you buy?
That was truly like a punchy number of questions. I think I've got the answer that will kind of touch off on all three of those questions. So my favourite was Lisa Demetrios, who is the curator of the Eames Institute of Infinite Curiosity. She's the granddaughter of Charles and Ray Eames, and her sofa it's simply called the Eames sofa by Herman Miller. It was the last piece that her grandparents designed together before Charles passed away, and it was first produced in 1984. But she talked about having it in her home before it was actually in production. And her whole thing that she says was, when she was growing up, basically her grandparents would send her mother a heap of different prototypes just to see if they could withstand 5 young grandchildren running and jumping all over the furniture. And I think that's what I kind of love about this, is that it's been prototyped, been tested. It's actually almost something that's been custom made for Lisa Demetrios. And I think that's where I would go with this. I would commission, if I may do this, is this within the rules?
Of course.
I'm going to commission my own sofa, and I am going to pick my favourite designer, Philippe Malois. I think his forms are playful, but also very, very practical, and I think you need that in a space. I love living in London. So many of the homes here are such odd shapes. I think it's really nice to have a piece that would ultimately respond to that.
Beautiful.
We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to the land of wine, cuisine, fashion, and the art of joie de vivre. France, the Monocle Handbook, is the third installment in our series of hardback guides for the best things to do, see and discover in all corners of l'Hexagone. Over 220 plus pages, Monocle's latest book showcases the crème de la crème of the country, from the Atlantic to the Alps, and the windswept Normandy to the sun-kissed Riviera. Plus, top tables in Paris, Nantes not to miss hotels, and where to splash out in Marseille, and plenty more to try from piste to plage. If you're looking to stay longer or put down roots, the book also spotlights the neighbourhoods to know and introduce you to the plucky entrepreneurs who have already made the move. France, the Monocle Handbook is out now. Buy your copy today at monocle.com/books.
Now, Grace, it's over to one of your stories. You spoke with Danish industrial designer legend Cecilie Manz. Tell us about your experience. You spent time in her studio?
One of the greats. It was quite special. It was during 3 days of design on a rainy day in June in Copenhagen. I went to her studio. Lots of objects everywhere. She loves traveling. She loves her little tchotchkes.
And did she talk, I think we're both big tchotchke fans. This is the thing. Did she talk about how those influence her work? Because that's quite funny to bring something back from a holiday or from your travels and not, just leave it on a bookshelf at home, but actually bring it into your studio.
Yeah, so she had these Japanese bowls that influenced her own bowls, and she was sort of looking at how she could craft it to be a little bit different. And we talked about it. She showed me her prototypes, which was just like a roll of tape with some pencil markings on it, essentially.
But it's interesting there you talk about, she's got these kind of prototypes. And I think reading this piece in the magazine, she talks a lot about the importance of her actually mocking things up, not just making computer models. You've written in the article that she employs people for that, but actually making physical, full-scale models of these things. Is this something you've seen often in your reporting? Like, how critical do you think this is to her, I guess, making these famed pieces that you really want to have in your home?
I think it's everything to her. I think she's so completely focused on function and simplicity and cutting away all the noise and the extra stuff and bringing it back to, is a chair comfortable? Will it sit nicely? Can you rest your arm on an armrest properly? She is to an extreme in that sense of analog prototyping and wanting to do it all herself. Let the youngsters take care of the computer programming.
We've talked about her, I guess, as well being this kind of icon, this person that has withstood the test of time. She's that next great generation of Danish designers and certainly leading it. But she mentioned that one of her pet peeves is the word trends. And she talks about the fact that not using something because it's popular, but because it has a purpose. I mean, where do you stand on this?
I feel a little bit conflicted about this sometimes because I don't know if bearing the mark of your time is necessarily a bad thing. I think the trend cycle is accelerating, that's for sure. But what's nice about Cecilie is that it's authentic to her, this extreme minimalism. You can tell by even the way she dresses. She just loves wearing Issey Miyake trousers every day and keeping it very pared back. And that's good for her.
And maybe that's it. Maybe it's about authenticity and what feels right to each, individual designer or each person and what they feel perhaps comfortable in. And maybe that's all it is.
And there is no debate in matters of taste.
I think you're spot on. And maybe what she is saying more than anything, it's less about the trends, but it is about finding, I guess, that thing that's authentic and resonates with the designer and resonates with the audience. And I think that's something that's absolutely key. But why are we talking about this? Why not hear from Cecilie now?
Did you always know you wanted to be a designer when you were growing up in Denmark?
My parents were both doing ceramics.
Wow.
I knew it would be something creative, but I wasn't sure which direction. And then I picked furniture just to do something slightly different than my rebellion, crazy rebellion, right? So they were self-employed, right? They were doing their thing. So in a way, I also grew up with this being your own boss. And so when I was done at the design school, Royal Academy, then I didn't think of if I should start my own business or not. Of course I should. It was just like, oh yeah, I'll go and form my business now and be self-independent designer. I saw what they did. So to me, that was the normal thing. But whereas maybe some of my colleagues or friends are like, oh, you need to do a business plan, you need to organize, and do you really dare to do that? But I didn't think, I just did it.
I always wonder if designers have like a fear of lack of inspiration or the fear of the blank page, which is what we have as a writer. But have you ever had that?
I never had that.
Really?
No.
Wow.
No, it's just hard work. Just get on.
Yeah.
Because once you get started, then maybe you do a lot of really shitty sketches. Who knows? You can always destroy it. But I never had this, it needs to be right. Maybe also because I think my method is more produce something. And then at some point, actually that one was interesting. And then you dig into it.
Yeah.
I do quick sketches, and also I do quick models, It's very instant. I can maybe also show you the workshop.
Yeah.
We have this kind of, I call it a library of sticks and materials, different materials and cardboard. And in a way, it turned out to be like that because it follows the way I work. So if we are doing a model, okay, now I need a round stick. Okay, then I just go there and then I grab a round stick. It's instant.
Yeah.
Okay, and then maybe I need to cut it, but it could also be a leg from a different project. And then so in a way, it's one big process, open process. That's the starting point. If I see something I like, then you can take it one step further.
I feel like, is that maybe like your advice for young designers? It's like, just do it, like don't over-intellectualize it.
Some people say, it's not good to have too many constraints and rules, and if you have a brief that it needs to be this and that. I never saw it as a minus. It can be quite helpful to have a brief or to set a brief or a task for yourself. So I also do these one-off projects or experimental works, and if I have some idea about whatever, I try to follow that to the end. I have one example I can show you also maybe next door. I did this tray inspired by this Japanese oak. I did a version where I thought, what if we tilted the wood in an angle? And in a way it sounded, that can't be possible. And my first sketch is a roll of tape where I marked the degrees on. It was very instant. Okay, I need a round shape, I have a tape roll, then I start drawing on that. And then after that we could go in detail, and that's when my assistant Koya, he could help me doing the drawing on the computer and calculate everything so that the carpenter could actually do it for us. I think it's helpful to have not just doodling out of the blue, but set a frame, because we needed to write a lot of digits and then came a line. It wasn't so intuitive. It was like programming, which was hopeless. I thought, okay, I think I might skip that part and just stay with my paper roll and my pens and my 3D, my mock-up in a three-dimensional. At some point many years ago, this is the first assistant I hired was because suddenly the manufacturer, they wanted a 3D file. Before, they needed a one-to-one drawing, and I needed to do blueprints and everything. I also sometimes see it if I have very young people working with me or being an intern, that their understanding of the three images, front, side, plan, I still think in this way. I always want it on, can we print it out in a scale on paper? Then I can refer to it. So I can't see proportions or sizes in a rendering or in the computer. In my opinion, if you do at least furniture, you can't skip that point. You can't skip doing a mock-up in one-to-one. You need to test it, you need to see how it interacts with your body. I mean, what's the height of the arm, what is... You need to test it. You can't do that in a computer.
But also design is like a material science. Even just like touching this wood, it's so soft.
But that's also something you learn by experience over the years, that if you see a cardboard model, you need to transfer that in your mind into, okay, I'm looking at a wooden chair. It's not a cardboard model. I think that's also an ability you can learn. At least I can do it because I'm a cardboard person, right? Whereas someone needs to see rendering. I think we also treasure beautiful details and good quality. At least that's how it's supposed to be, in my opinion. When I entered this field, I was worrying a lot, feeling a bit guilty all the time.
Really? Why?
Producing stuff, bringing stuff to the world. I always felt it was a bit bad. Now I'm being very honest, but on the other hand, I just really enjoy doing beautiful stuff. I don't like mixing art and design too much. Keep it sacred. I'm a designer. I do design, functional objects that should last for a long time. And in a way, that's what I'm constantly reminding myself, and that gratifies that I bring new stuff into the world. And at least it should be nice quality, nice design that lasts long, and all these parameters that you would say is good old design virtues, right? But I also see that now there's a whole thing in between. We have a way to say it in the field between art and design. I think when you do design, you need to have functionality in the picture. Otherwise, then maybe you should call it art. Design is about functionality.
Yeah.
Of course, it's always this balance. We want to do it as beautiful as possible, but that's always the balance of how can we combine aesthetics and functionality and the making, it's a riddle that we need to solve together with the manufacturer. If I sit and doodle and then have it made, that's a completely different thing. Then it's my expression. And I also do experimental work, but I'm very open about this is for my own sake. Maybe someone will pick it up because they think it's interesting or whatever. It still always have the functionality is important.
That was Cecilie Manz.
And you can read your full interview with Cecilie in the November issue of Monocle magazine. Grace, we'll be right back after this with another one of your stories.
Tune in to Monocle on Culture, where we grill our panel of critics to get the inside line on the best in the world of film, music, art, literature and more.
It's just got this synth section that kind of makes you want to swing through the saloon doors straight to the dance floor.
With industry insiders and the odd bit of reportage too, it's bound to keep the most discerning of culture vultures very well fed.
Why'd You Come In Here Looking Like That is a song that is absolutely going to make you want to put on a pair of tight jeans and go boot scooting, even if it's just in your front room.
Monocle on Culture, premiering Mondays at 2000 London time and available thereafter wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Monocle on Design. Today's episode is a special November preview where we look at some of the stories hitting the newsstand in this month's issue of Monocle magazine. Grace, we're moving to another one of your interviews, this time with Archibong, a brilliant Swiss-based designer who you met at the Victoria and Albert Museum for an exhibition that was on during this year's London Design Festival. The showcase was called Craft by Tech, and it's an initiative that pairs Japanese craftspeople with designers from across the globe. And we are going to hear a little bit about that collaboration in this interview, but I guess I want to dive into maybe what you found so fascinating about Ini, because we bumped into each other shortly after you'd interviewed him, and you just talked about this amazing energy and enthusiasm that he had for his work. So give us a little bit of the background on Ini.
I hate to use this word, but he really does have an aura which is out of this world. Like, he comes in wearing really long drapey clothes and he's got this deep booming voice and a calming presence, but also very playful. He's always laughing. And we sat down and we talked about what he made with these lacquer craftspeople in Japan. It's sort of like an egg, for lack of a better word. It's a strange object.
And you talked about him emitting an aura, because I went and saw this egg shortly after. And
did you?
It emits a sound as you kind of move your hand over it, playing with, I was going to say theremin inside, and it responds to you as you kind of move through the room. It's very atmospheric.
He wasn't going to tell me about the actual technicalities and behind it, because he does want to sort of suspend disbelief, and he talks about it as if it's got alien energy and you can play with it and it makes a sort of sound. It's really fun.
And maybe that contrasting experience talks to the difference between I went with the craftspeople, you went with the designer, and you certainly get two very different takes on it. But what I like is we're talking a little bit about atmosphere here, and so much of his work seems to be about this kind of world building, and one of the things he mentioned to you in the interview in the magazine is that he loved books, C.S. Lewis, and he would read them as an escape and take into a different world. I mean, we're talking about, practicality with Cecilie Manz earlier, but now I guess we're talking about world building here. We've got two very different kind of pieces of design. How do you reconcile them in a magazine? Is not to say that one's wrong or one's right, but is there one that resonates with you perhaps more?
I don't really want to pick a lane because it's fun to sort of move in between both, but I do appreciate world building, but I also want to sit on a chair that is very comfortable.
If we're going to go back to the chat about sofas at the very top, it's about using furniture to build worlds, and maybe you need to strike that balance between the things that are incredibly practical, but also the things that have a story attached to them, are a little bit atmospheric, maybe represent who you are as a person. There's a little bit of both that I guess is kind of essential. These aren't things that are just standalone items. Unless you're literally living in an art gallery, you're not just going to walk in and see Ini's theremin egg. You're going to walk in and see a space that's completely furnished with chairs, tables, benches, tchotchkes. Maybe that's ultimately what this is about. But let's hear from Ini himself in this conversation you had with him at the Victoria and Albert Museum.
When you encounter a piece like this, you don't know what's going on. It's emitting a sound. It reacts to your presence with the ability to suspend disbelief and enter in kind of a realm of fantasy. Then I had to articulate what this is in that world of fantasy. What I've been doing over time is creating pieces that fit into what I call a mythology of the children of the diaspora. All the pieces that fall into that canon of work are meant to be viewed as if they were artifacts that were part of this mythology. And each piece unfolds it a little bit more. This is the first piece that I've done that can be attributed to alien technology.
Which diaspora? Because you're quite cross-cultural. You're Nigerian, grew up in the US, now you live in Switzerland. Which diaspora? This was Japan.
At the base of the mythology of the diaspora, it starts from the diaspora that I come from to tell a story that I think is, in the end, hopefully going to be relatable to all people in the globalized future. I think there's going to come a point where everyone is going to be part of a diaspora. And I come from the West African diaspora, so I tell the story from that perspective, but I think it applies to all. One of the things that is important is that we reestablish the importance of storytelling and mythology to be a part of the culture, right? There's different types of art that deliver different types of messages that are there for different purposes, and my goal with these pieces is to be intentional about retelling some of the mythology and storytelling that has been told over centuries in a new context with modern approach and mentality, with a focus on a globalized humanity, right? That's different than the mythology of the past that were more based on a localized space. I do intentionally make these statements about what the pieces are about, but I also intentionally keep it a bit vague so people can fill in the gaps.
You're very big on including spirituality in your design practice. How did this come about? Why?
When I started on the journey to be a creator, it was a spiritual mission, and it has been a spiritual mission, and it took me out of more of a mundane perspective on what I was here to do, right? Because of that, there's not really a separation for me. For better or for worse, it's more than just a job. And I think that's always going to be what it is. And I don't necessarily design from a place of practicality. I make functional things, but I guess the way that they come about are intuitive and not contrived. When you do things from an instinctual or intuitive place and you really ask yourself, where does it come from? There's only one place that it could come from, and that's from an unseen spiritual space. So from that sense, because I design in that way, I have to look at everything that I create as something that comes from there. And also just fantasy, comics, cartoons, all of that feeds into it. Not only was I a kid that was in church every Sunday, but every day I was reading. I loved the books from Frank Baum, the Oz books. I loved C.S. Lewis. I loved these books where when I read them, I was in a different world, right? Comic books, video games, movies, all that stuff was my escape. So it makes sense that when I create things, when I imagine things, they fit in this universe that's adjacent to here. And it's almost like I can grab them from there and bring them here.
That was Archibong in conversation with Grace Charlton. Grace, that's all for today's show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Nick.
It's always a pleasure. For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well. It's got all of these stories and more that we've talked about on today's show. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylee Evans. I'm Nick Manise, and you can reach me on nm@monocle.com. Thanks for listening.